of the Bears. We're determined and we just don't care who we play or who we maul. Our team's gonna rule them all. We're proud and we're tough. Not stop until we've had enough. We're mean, we're on the prowl. Our team's gonna knock them out. Everybody's gonna scream and shout. The red and blacks are gonna make us proud. So beware of the Bears.
Yeah, my father, Harry McKinnon, had a great influence on me. For a starter, he used to drag me and mum along to all the football games when I was a kid. I probably started going when I was 4 or 5 years old, and used to go to North Sydney Oval. And you know, I was a North supporter right from the word go.
Well, in 1970, I was playing for Eastern Suburbs in Brisbane. Came out of under-18s the year before and into grade. We made the semi-finals, and the story goes that Roy Francis came to Brisbane to watch a guy called Lenny Dittmar, who was playing in the forwards for first grade for Brisbane. They were in the first grade semi-final, and I played in the reserve grade game. We made the grand final the week after. He came up. We won that game. Next week he rang me up and said, "Bruce, we'd like you to come down and play in Sydney." Dad and I came down, had a look, had a chat. We signed. My very first night of training was torrential rain at North Sydney Oval, and knew no one, and Roy said, everyone just do 20 laps. Well, I felt like packing up and going back to Brisbane. But I think the major shock was that Roy had a dispute with the committee and was on a boat back to England before the season kicked off. Merv took over as captain coach, and as I said, I was very young and I was pretty inexperienced as a second row because I'd only played for about 2.5 seasons in the back row. Merv broke his arm and he only played a handful of games.
Merv Hicks, another Englishman had come out with North Sydney, and another giant. I don't know where they got him from. He was actually, I think he was the second biggest man I've ever seen besides Hugh Mills. Merv was a good ball distributor, a tough competitor, and a lovely guy. I've had the opportunity to meet him after football, and I find Merv an excellent fellow.
It was a bit devastating to me because we lost more games than we won. And I'd only played rugby league for 3 years, under 17s, 18s and reserve grade. We won 2 grand finals and lost 1. So it was a bit of a shock to be in a side that was beaten more times than we won. I think we had an ageing side, and well, the majority of players were ageing. We weren't fit. They didn't take it seriously enough. And I had a lot to learn with second row play about who to run off, and I couldn't create as many gaps because we were playing against far superior players than I'd been used to playing against, playing against a host of internationals every week.
Well, I think the 4-tackle rule really stood out, that it wasn't going to be a success, and the 6-tackle rule was certainly opened up a new ball game, which you could tell had brought the fans back and made it a faster game and a more spectators game.
Well, I was playing in 1971 with Blackpool Borough, which is no longer has a team. But we had a good team back then. We had a few players who'd toured Australia, and I was playing pretty well, so I got a few offers, including Norths, and I'd been over there 3 years, so my wife back then wanted to come home, so we came home, and I worked it out when I came home, but I ended up at Norths.
Well, it was a marginal improvement, 1972 on 1971. We had Timmy Pickup, and I think we got Keithy Houghton and Brian Anderson, another front rower. So we had some additions, but we'd lost a number of players from the year before, and the problem was that we had, I think, perhaps a coach that didn't really want to be a coach in Merv Hicks at the time, and I think, with those additions of those players. But there was a lot of shuffling. There were a number of injuries. Players were in and out. And the other problem that we had too at North Sydney was that we never had any great depth. We had a fair percentage of very good players in first grade, but once you had one or two or three injuries, we just never had the staff or player staff to kick on and convert more than the odd one or two wins.
It was like we were heavy on with big forwards, like we never got beaten in a blue, but we needed some more backs, and it was never the right balance.
One particular game that stood out, it's the hardest game I've ever played in, it was mud from one end of the field to the other, and the first 10 minutes, it was when they had the English players, a lot of the English players, Jimmy Mills and all of those. I ached after about a quarter of an hour. My body ached, and theirs would have been the same, I'm sure. But we ended up we ran away with it. We just got a few breaks, but I'd say that would have been the hardest game that I've ever played. Just to pick your feet up in the last quarter of an hour was just like running a marathon. It was just so hard, but it was just what you had. The usual playing against North Sydney when Manly played North Sydney.
Jim Mills was about 17.5 stone and could run. He made a break right down the middle of the ground, and the only person standing between him and the goal line was this McLean, and he stood there and you could virtually see his legs shaking because Jim Mills was going to run right over the top of him and bury him in the ground, but he pulled a hamstring as if somebody had shot him about 10 metres before he got to him. He went down like a shot elephant. It was almost funny. It wasn't so sad at the time. But he was a very tough player. He was a very hard player. But as I said, I don't think Sydney ever saw the best of Jim Mills.
We had a rule with him at Newtown: don't upset Jim. And what we'd do, we'd never try to niggle him, upset him, give him cheek or anything like that. Just let him go through the game. And if Jim was happy going through the game, we were happy.
In 1972, we started the season well, and I got in Sydney seconds and played well, so I got in the state side and went on and got in the Australian side. And George had not, he might have been in the Sydney side, but he wasn't in the state side, and he was just sort of out of the blue.
Well, George Amblin was another lovely fellow. He was a pleasure, George. Everybody loved George. He'd had a long career. I think he was in the latter part of his career when I joined North Sydney in 1971. But he still was playing great football. He could score tries. He had legs like tree trunks. He could run. And everyone, as soon as the ball would go out, they'd say, "Give it to George, give it to George." But George was a lovely fellow. He was a very good player. Yeah, I was proud to play with George. He was very good.
You've got to remember that in those days things were a little bit different than they are now, you know. And Acker Forbes and Harry McKinnon were two great friends of mine. We often shared a few sherbets together. And I was talking to them one day and they said, "Why don't we're looking for a coach for the seconds?" You know, I said, "Oh, I don't know." Anyway, they told me and got me half full of ink one night, I think, and I said, "Oh, okay, I'll give the seconds a run if you're desperate enough to try me as a coach, non-playing coach," because I'd been a coach at West a captain coach for about 4 years. And I mean, there's a hell of a difference between a captain coach being on the field and a non-playing coach, I can tell you. So I really wanted to try out the difference, I reckon. So I went to North, and Merv Hicks was the coach. Now Merv and North were in a period where they were in that downer sort of a thing. They just never had that match winner that could put the ball over the line and make his job a lot easier, you know. And I think Merv had just about had a gutful of it 3 parts through the season, you know. And he said to Acker and Harry, well, I believe he said to Acker and Harry that he'd had enough at the end of the year, so they said to me, do you want to coach the first? And I said, oh, you sort it out with Merv, you know. And to my mind, there was never anything. Merv moved on and I took over coaching the first.
Well, he put a lot of discipline back into North Sydney, and he had a few good years there, Noel. I was a great admirer of Noel Kelly as a coach. I reckon he was a top man.
Well, my former years, I was actually a soccer player, and I only started playing rugby union when I was 18, and that was with my university, which was a place called Loughborough. They were a very good university side, and really I developed from there. Playing hooker, so I never got out of the front row, unfortunately, and I played then for Coventry once I'd left university, and went on to play for England in rugby union. I think the reason I looked to change to rugby league is because my final game of rugby union was at the International Sevens up at Murrayfield for England, and I'd had a particularly good tournament there. And whilst I was playing cricket in the summer, Wigan Rugby League directors came and saw me and said, would you like to play rugby league? And if you'd like to play rugby league, we'll give you £7,500. Well, I'd never seen a game of rugby league, but the £7,500 was very attractive. And the reason it was is because I was earning £14 a week as a teacher at the time. And I tried to get a mortgage to buy a house for £6,000, and the bank wouldn't give me one because they said I wasn't earning enough. So I'm afraid the reasons for going were purely mercenary, and that £7,500 bought me a new house and a new car. So here I came to rugby league, and I'd never seen a game before I actually played it.
Well, Noel Kelly took over as coach in 1973. And I think comparing his coaching ability then to the coaching aids and training that goes into coaches nowadays is probably a little unfair. But and I never saw Ned play, of course, Noel Kelly play, but I believe, and I've seen some clippings and footage, but he was as tough as they come. And I think Ned approached coaching in exactly the same way. There was no subtleties with Noel Kelly. You could either play or go and join the second grade coach.
This match has one of the most sensational openings in the history of the code. In a flare-up of violence, Gleeson's is flattened by Orchard, and watch Kelly of Australia, number 11. Referee Pearce has an all-in brawl on his hands. He's quick to restore order, and with a firm decision, he sends off both the offending players, Orchard number 10 and Kelly number 11, with the match less than 2 minutes old.
I had to bring a toughness there. There had to be a toughness brought into Norths. But I did overlook the fact that there were players there who were good players, but they weren't tough players. You know, they were receivers. They'd get belted, you know, and they wouldn't hand much back. And I refer to Bruce Walker. Now, Bruce Walker was as good a player as you'd ever want in your club. You know, there's no doubt. Played for Australia, went the Kangaroos. Good player, terrific player, you know. But God, some of the things that used to happen to Bruce Walker, everybody in the place used to belt him, you know, purely and simply because Goldie just wasn't a belter, belting them back, you know. And of course, my old saying was to retaliate first, you know. Like, I mean, you got to, if they give you one, you got to give them one straight back, or you're a rat shit. They'll stick with you the rest of your life, you know. Mm. But they don't want to know you if you belt them back. Mm. So this was my first bit was to toughen up. And if you toughen them up in their game, you'll toughen up their defence. Mm. And you'll build their confidence too if blokes start getting stuck into them, you know. Mm. So that was where we basically started.
Yeah, I can remember Noel Kelly one year saying to me before a game, Bruce, I want you to bash this guy and you know, take him out of the game and knock him out. And I said, no, I don't know how to do that. It's not me. I can't do that. I've got to play play the game. I'll play it as hard and clean as you like, but I can't just go up there and hit somebody for the sake of doing it. So, but that was the kind of player Noel Kelly was, or the kind of coach that he was. And admittedly, his heart was in it. He was in there. I thought sometimes he'd have heart attack, but we had a lot of success, not as much as we should have.
It was unbelievable. Peter and Skip signed in '72 from Canterbury for $3,000 a year, and he really had a good year. Played every game and played well. And we beat Canterbury. He kicked a field goal. Do you remember that? We beat him 19-18. He kicked a field goal with no time left. Anyway, he had a good year. So he wanted the same money to stay, and they offered him too. This is nice. And so I said to Harry, he had a good year. And Harry started bringing up these statistics that, like he said, do you know he never missed kicking the ball out from a penalty once? Things like this, all stuff. I said, so why aren't we keeping him? And anyhow, Barry Glasgow in '72 had a lot of injuries, but he really came good in '73.
In '73, we had the likes of Brian Anderson, who came with a player called Eddie Heatley. They were bought as a package deal. Eddie was supposed to be the better player, and he was a good player, Eddie, but Brian Anderson, Puppy Anderson, was what we needed. He had plenty of starch in him. You know, he was as tough as anybody I've ever seen. And he brought something with him that had been lacking in the North Sydney side for years.
Barry Glasgow was captain in '73. It was like he'd been at the club longer than me.
Keith Houghton was another one. Keith Houghton, ex-Balmain player, excellent player. He was terrific for Norths. And they were the players who were no giving them, you know, and of course they took all our younger players along with them. And we had some damn good young players around North, you know, but we always needed those couple of extra blokes with a bit of starch in them, you know.
So I started my rugby league career in September 1973, and then I was obviously seen by selectors, and just after Christmas I managed to get into the Great Britain side, which I was very surprised about, and others, of course, in my Wigan team were saying, what's this bloke doing playing for Great Britain when he's hardly played the game, but they just wanted somebody in there who took the ball up and tackled, and that's what I was basically doing at the time.
In the Kangaroos in '73, you get friendly with everyone kind of thing, but you have your own particular mates. But I spoke to a few guys about coming over at North. We started going well in '73 towards the end, and we had a good year in '74. This was at the end of the '73 season while we were over there. So I had about 5 of them. I had Ray Brannigan, Jeff Starling, John Lang, and a couple of others that they said, yeah, well, we'll come and have a talk to North. So I got back and I got onto ACCA, and ACCA said, well, tell them to give me a call. And I said, that's not how things work. You just actually ring them up and say, you know, make them feel like you'd like them to come here, and nothing ever happened. So that was that, same old thing.
Tim Pickup, '74. Well, if you didn't make him captain, he wouldn't play. He was totally uncoachable. How do you like this, Grub? And he was nicknamed to suit, you know, so who would argue with a name like Grub for a nickname? He was a good player, Grub. He was an excellent player. Kangaroo. What more can I say? He was one of those little fellas that could break the game up by chipping over the top. He was a talker, and he was tough too. He was a tough little fella, and him along with Keithy Houghton, they were a good pair of halves. And of course we had a couple of little kids there too. Gary Pretty was one, and they were good fill-ins too. You know, they were all good kids coming along at the same time. But Grub was he was good for the club as well. You know, he had a great friend in ACCA and Grub got on terrific, like 2 tiger snakes.
Well, 1974 followed up, as I said, with the inclusion of players like Tim Pickup and Keith Houghton that have been here now for 2 years. We had Keith Harris in the centres. We had Roger Lavis joined us, and Roger Lavis was a very very tough second row forward, very young but very strong and hard. We had a pretty fair side. But I think the main success there was that we trained pretty well in the off season. We had a pretty fair side. We trained well, we were fit. We had good pre-season. We struck Manly first up at North Sydney Oval, first game of the round. They'd won the premiership 2 years in a row. And I can remember Noel Kelly going through the program prior to the game, and there was something like 11 internationals in Manly side. Yet, according to Ned, none of them could play, and all we had to do was go out there and just put it to them. Well, we ended up winning that game something like 27-15.
In that game, something happened. I'll never forget this. That I always used to have trouble with Ian Martin. He's a really good player and a big guy, and so things were different back then. There was this all in blue that started, and I said, right, I go up and I said, I'm going to rip into Ian. I felt like he's a bigger guy than me, and he's sort of, I don't know how he can fight or whatever, but I thought I can give it to him and it'll get broken up before it goes much further, right? You know, so, and anyway, that was going to happen. It was all going to be on, but there was just one thing that stopped me, and I spoke to Terry Randall the next day. We used to have a drink down the Time and Tide Hotel at Dee-Why on Monday night, all the different players, and Terry got sent off in that game. And just on the way in, Ross Warner hit Bill Hamilton on the chin, and it was like they just cut a great big hole in the ground. He just disappeared. It was like he just got whacked over the head with a baseball bat, and that stopped me dead. And Terry Randall said, yeah, I saw that myself, you know. It sort of stopped the whole blue. Everyone thought, I don't want to get onto one of those. So, but it was the same old thing. Roscoe somehow managed not to get seen, not to get sent off, and didn't go on about it, but he didn't start many blues. Things were different back then, but he finished a few.
And I can remember at half-time, we came in and we were in front, and Noel Kelly, I think he didn't know what to say because we were playing so well and defending, and we'd scored tries, and the crowd was going berserk, and it was just a great feeling to knock them off. Everyone, I think thought it was a bit of a fluke. After the Manly game, we played West, who had a very good side, and we drew 18 all. And then we had a narrow 7-2 loss to Newtown, who also had a very good side. Then we played East, who eventually went on to win the competition that year.
Oh, it was a classic. Ned got the program out. He went through their team, which they had the team from hell. From Russell Fairfax to Bill Mullins and Jim Porter, John Brass, I think it was Mark Harris and John Peard, and he went through the whole team. The whole team were just a bunch of cats. It was funny, when he went through the whole team, the first guy he got to that wasn't an out-and-out cat, like he'd say, here we are, Russell Fairfax is a cat, Bill Mullins, a cat, John Brass is a cat. And he just went through the whole team, and he got down to Ron Coote, was a show pony. I always say to Cootie, like, you were the first guy that got an upgrade, and then they went back to being cats. Even Arthur was a cat, I think, Ellen Walters, and he said, so they're a bunch of cats, just go out and give it to them. So he went out and beat them, and he said, I told you. So, but we also had game plans and things like that. I mean, Ned was a good coach.
They had scored some unbelievable number of points in the first two games, yet we kept them tryless, and we won. In fact, I scored the only try in that game. I always remember that game at the sports ground.
We had a guy up there called Mick Healy, God bless him. He's a big, strong, strapping young bloke, and big, strong jaw and everything. On a couple of days' growth on Mick, and he looked like a bloody gorilla. So anyway, this day I said to our little halfbacks, Arthur beats and throws a lot of balls on the ground, and I said, Mick, your job is today is you've got to belt him whether he's getting it, belt him whether he's got it, or belt him whether he's just getting rid of it, Anyway, he did. And Mick was one of those players who could run a bit hot and cold. He could also run like a hare. He was a big, strong and fast player. Anyway, this day he followed Artie round and he drove Arthur Beats and nuts, and Arthur was throwing them on the ground, and we were and my little halfbacks around the back there picking it up, and away we'd go, you see. And I think the day we beat them, we also had a bit of luck with the goal kicking. I think Bruce Warwick kicked half a dozen goals from the sideline. but we don't care how we got the points as long as we got them, you know. So, and this particular day was probably the best game of rugby league that Mick Healy had ever played in his life. And after the game, we had a drink back under the stand, and I was talking to Arthur, and I said, "How you going?" And he said, "Who was that bloody big ape you put on the meal afternoon?" And I said, "Oh, just a local lad over there that turns up every now and again, you know." And Arthur said, "Jesus, he never left me alone all bloody day." So if Cornwall Cats was the answer to Grub, well, that was different. It surprises me that Grub could remember that I'd done that, because he's never listened to a coach in his life. So at least I've got through to him there as well, you know.
We had, as I said, a very good year. We played, I think, I was looking back through history a while ago, I think we only lost about 3 games or 2 games in that first round. Unfortunately, I suffered an ankle injury and missed 7 games, which also ruined any chance I had of playing representative football during the season.
Changes in both sides for South Sydney, playing today without their captain Bob McCarthy. 3 changes. Halfback Bob Grant is replaced by Barry Woods. Second rower Herb Timms replaced by Bob Bolden. And front rower Brad Jones replaced by Bill Sawyers. 3 changes, 2 in the forwards and 1 at the halfback spot for South Sydney. For North Sydney, also 1 change. This change is in the forwards. Chris Mason, the second rower who was named during the week, has been forced to withdraw. His place has been taken by the former New Zealand player Eddie Heatley, who returns to the North Sydney pack after injury. Second kick for South Sydney now to be taken by Piggins. Sawyers. Piggins. It's Woods. Withers. Sate going down the blind side. Sate caught. That was a good tackle from Warner, but good run too.
Paul Sate will be looking for a big game today, considering the test selection coming up tomorrow night.
And his test teammate, Gary Stevens, also needing a big game today. Woods, that's Heeden. Good long pass out to Mooney. Mooney is quick. Mooney will score for South. Good try, South Sydney. First points of the match, a tremendous try scored by Tom Mooney.
These fellows are smaller, naturally they'll get tired tackling these big fellows as the game progresses.
Healy. Lavis. Harris. Another good tackle, good defence. Sawyers, number 13 that time. Warner. Outen. Anderson. More good defence. Healy though. To Warner. Pick up. Moritz. Outen. Long one again. Harris dummying. Now the last tackle coming up. High kick by Warwick. It's gone straight across field. Plenty of South Sydney players there. Burnett looking for it. North's getting it back too. Tackle count has started again. Anderson. Lavis. Burnett. Dave Burnett, a former rugby union international, and he's got a lot of things to show us yet in rugby league. Pick up. Anderson.
Very good the way Dave Burnett stands back and runs hard on the ball, as you'll notice as this game goes on.
That's Heatley. North Sydney pressing the South's line now. 2 tackles to go. North's could be hard to hold out though. Out to the centres. Good try, George Varela. Lovely try. It had to come. Scored by centre George Varela for Norths, levelling the scores at 3 points all with a conversion attempt to come.
Well, there we saw just an example of just what I was saying a moment ago. The inside backs have been floating across the field a little bit, but we had a fellow coming hard onto the ball, and he's hard to stop when he gets the ball. A good try by North Sydney.
North still with the ball. Warner. Playing it to Lavis. Anderson. Outen, Moritz, over the top of the head, out to the winger to Hope. Hope showing a lot of speed. Good tackle in the last effort though. Woods it was, the halfback. Anderson.
South's becoming a little bit lax in defence now. They're waiting for their partner to do the work, and consequently neither is doing it.
And the two South Sydney players penalised there by referee Breers were lock forward Sate and 5'8 Withers. That's a better looking kick. In fact, that's 2 points. 5 points to 3 is the score after 15 minutes of play in the first half. North Sydney in front by 5 points to 3. The kicker was Bruce Warwick. Play into Woods. Long one again. Stevens losing it. North ball. Harris trying to run around Eden, but taken by Moylan. Moritz. Lavis. That's Anderson. Warner getting a pass to Healy.
The North Sydney forwards as a pack are looking much better than South, both in attack and defence at this stage of the game.
Pick up. North Sydney captain looking for support, running away from it though. Moritz backing him up. Moritz over the quarter line. North's on the attack. Pick up. Healy and Outen looking for support. It's there. This is better play from North Sydney. They haven't shown us this sort of form for a long time. Akeley, a long pass. That's Lavis. Outen. Lavis again, reversing it to pick up. There's an overlap this side if they want to bring it across. Heatley. Now only one tackle to go. Moritz's dummy half. Short kick. It's high though. Flying through is Burnett and into touch in goal. 15 minutes to go before the break. Warwick attempting the penalty goal from beyond the quarter line. He's got that one. 7 points to 3 in favour of North Sydney. Just on 15 minutes to go before half-time. Sims putting it down into touch on the full, and that's a penalty to North Sydney on halfway. And if Bruce Warwick feels so inclined, he can have another shot for goal from here. We'll wait and see the decision from Timmy Pickup. He's in fact going to give it to Harris for a shot at the touchline.
That's a good decision by Tim Pickup. That kick was possibly too far out. Get down there in the south quarter and put the pressure on.
And that was certainly a very good kick from Harris. A very long punt kick indeed for the line, and Warner will take the second kick inside the South Sydney quarter line. Anderson.
It's good to see these North Sydney forwards getting back deep and running onto the ball.
Lavis, Heatley, reversing it. Harris to play it. To Warner. Outen, Lavis, Healy. Lavis still has it. Outen, Anderson. 2 tackles to go. Pick up. Harris. Almost straight through. He's over the line. Can he ground it? He has. It's a try. He didn't look as though he was going to be able to ground that, but in the end he did. Referee Breers right on the spot. That's the score.
Bad defensive lap by South Sydney. Pick up, wave that ball around for fully 4 seconds. He showed everybody he's going to give a dummy, and then they watched Harris as he strolled over. They must tighten this defence up.
Warwick once again attempting the conversion. Not a difficult kick. He's got another 2 points to make it 12-3. 12 points to 3. 12 minutes to go before the break. Second kick now to be taken by Piggins, midway between the quarter line and half. Woods, Withers, Sate almost got through there. About 7 minutes to go before half-time. Norths are leading 12-3. Eden. That's Boland. Running wide from the second row. Sawyers. Ball won by Norths. Burnett. Varela.
There we see again how South have possession, but they needlessly give it away with a silly pass and not hang on to the ball as they go to the ground.
Lavis sending the overhead pass to Moritz, who picked it up beautifully. To Hope, Outen, pick up. Lavis still getting the ball back, and it's Norths in attack with Varela caught, and Burnett, who's backing up tremendously well today. Dave Burnett having, I would say, his best game since turning to rugby league. Pick up, Outen, it's Heatley.
All these North Sydney players are hungry for work. They can't get into the game enough, and they're all running onto the ball.
Healy got out of that tackle. Now one tackle to go. Let's watch pick up, number 6. It's going to be another of the players there putting it into the air.
North Sydney are very tradesman-like in their performance. Souths are hurrying their game, and consequently we see drop passes.
Withers unloading it to Sims, up to halfway, out to Moylan. Crashing cover defence from Keith Outen, number 7. Mooney. Sate. Good backing up, but the pass astray. Still a South Sydney ball.
South will rely heavily on Paul Sate. It's just a pity that Bob McCarthy isn't in there to come off Paul Sate when he makes these runs.
Withers. Stevens. Eden on the North Sydney quarter line. One tackle to go. A chance now for South. Sims calling for the ball. There he is. And knocking on. No mind though, the penalty. A penalty has been awarded to North, to Souths, with the North Sydney defence coming up too quickly. They anticipated that kick from Sims and they ran through accordingly. So 12 points to 3. Eric Sims going to attempt the goal. Mr. Reliable in the South Sydney district. Making the score a little bit more respectable for South Sydney before half-time.
Apparently Tim Pickup thought that Paul Sate reefed the ball from the player's hands, and he had a word to the referee, but the referee was right on the spot and just noticed the ball was dropped.
Scrum set by Outen. North Sydney ball. Reversal of play to Moritz. Jim, the presence back in the side today of Ross Warner really must have helped North Sydney.
Must have been a very confidence booster for North Sydney. Ross Warner is a great hooker, but as I said before, not only a good hooker, he's a very good ball distributor, a very good dummy half. He has a look before he passes the ball and makes sure he throws it either one way or the other, open or the blind, or the blind side, whichever is more favourable. A very good dummy half.
So North's in possession, midway between the South Sydney quarter line and halfway, playing it to Warner. Healy. And the ball won in the play, the ball by Piggins, but it was knocked on. What bad luck again for Souths.
What an eager beaver this Piggins is for South. He's always trying, never off the ball, trying something different, and he's a very good hooker to go with it.
Withers. Souths have the ball on their own quarter line. Sims. O'Donnell caught. Penalty is against Owen O'Donnell. Warwick attempting the penalty goal from just beyond the South Sydney quarter line. It's not a hard kick. And he's got it. 14 points to 7 is the score with about 25 minutes to go. Woods showing a lot of dash to get through that gap. Out to Withers. Withers will score. It's a try for South Sydney. Withers is in. High kick by Moritz. Ball lost, and a North Sydney ball, Burnett. Pick up, Houghton, Lavis. He lost the ball, Eden for Souths. Mooney.
What an exciting game this is developing into. Both teams now throwing the ball around and they're jumping on any mistake made by the other side.
Eden playing it just inside the South's half, the North's half. Stevens, Sate. Pickens getting it back to Stevens. Boland with it. To Woods now. Sawyers to play it. Woods, Withers. Getting it back again, Mooney. Nice low tackle from Varela. One tackle to go. O'Donnell, Sims. For the line. Hope can't take it. Scrum going down just out from the North Sydney line.
This Eric Sims is magical with this boot. He can just put it on 5 cents, and he did not give that winger a chance to catch the ball.
Pick up to Burnett. Here's a chance for Norths now. They've got an overlap as it goes out to Warwick. Good backing up. This is Varela. Varela almost away. No support back there for him. What a great game this has been. Play going from one end of the field to the other. Norths are attacking now. Out to Alton. Putting it back to pick up. In fact, that movement went so quickly that it left behind a lot of North Sydney players right down the other end of the field. Now they're all bunched. Lavis. Tackles running out.
One player who didn't leave behind, Alan, was Gary Stevens, who's away back there covering.
Anderson now. Norths have 2 tackles to go. Pick up to Harris. 1 tackle to go. What will Norths do here? Warner dummy half, getting it out. Quick passing. Anderson, he's caught. Good defence. So with about 2.5 minutes to go, Norths must win this ball from the scrum if they're going to have any chance whatsoever and run it down to the South Sydney goal. Souths, on the other hand, have only got to win it to win the game.
Ross Warner will try every trick he knows in the book and possibly even run the chance of being penalised.
Harris. Looking for Moritz. An overlap on the far side. Moritz out of that tackle. Almost down to the quarter line. Playing it to Warwick. Pick up. Alton. Hope. Pick up. Warner. Alton caught, put to the ground. Tackles running out. Heatley dummy half. Pick up. Moritz. Two tackles to go for Norths. About a minute to go. Pick up. Will kick here. And they'll have to follow it through quickly. Sims waiting for it. Harris underneath it. Knocked it forward though. So did Anderson. So the last scrum of the match will go down just out from the South Sydney goal line, and the South Sydney supporters are having heart failure.
But I must tell you, the one game which was supposed to be my big trial before getting selected for the Great Britain tour to Australia and New Zealand in early 1974, I had to play against Big Jim Mills, and he and I were both props at that time against each other. And Jim thought it was between him and me to go on the tour rather than perhaps both of us going. So he gave me a really hard time. I mean, he's a bigger fella than I am, and his fists are the size of buckets, and he was hitting me with everything. So, of course, I had to try and hit him back and have a go at Jim, because otherwise, you know, if you're seen to laid back, there was no way you were going to get on this tour. So I came off with a shellacking, but I got Jim a couple of times anyway. But following that and getting on the tour, it was... I didn't know really what a tour of Australia, New Zealand was going to be like, and what the standard of play was going to be. And I must admit, it started off as a bit of a holiday, because we left Manchester at 3 degrees and arrived at Darwin, of all places, and it was 37 degrees. And when you got off the plane, it was like being hit with a dry blanket. The heat was something I'd never felt before. And we had to play in Darwin. Then we moved across to Cairns, and they took us out to the Green Island in these lovely boats, and then gave us snortels and goggles and left us there for the day, and we got burnt and then had to play next night, and we didn't want our shoulders to be touched because we were red raw. And but again, we played the games and came down the coast and went to Townsville and Maryborough and Rockhampton, and you know, they were nice, easy games for us. And our next stop after that was Brisbane, where we had a tougher game against Brisbane themselves. And then we got to Grafton, and that was the first time where we met Kevin Humphreys. And Kevin Humphreys, he came and addressed us, and he told us in no uncertain terms, and we weren't really expecting what he was going to say. And Kevin said, you better start pulling yourselves together and start bringing yourself together as a unit, else this tour is going to be a flop, even though we'd won all the games so far. He said, we've got a strong Australian side. You haven't seen any of them yet, but unless you improve your standards, this tour will be a disaster financially for you, and your reputations are at stake. Well, we were quite incensed about that, but he was correct, and he was right. And we did pull up our socks, and we did start shaping up a bit. We went back to Brisbane, lost the first test 12-6. Very, very tough game. We then went further on to Sydney, and we knew it was a do or die in the second test. And we came out on top by 16 points to 11, and so it made for a great finale.
Before a very large crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground on a perfect winter's day, bright sunshine, a clear blue sky, the ground in perfect order, the third and deciding Rugby League test between Australia and Great Britain. Australia won the first test in Brisbane by 12 points to 6. Great Britain kept the series alive by winning in a most determined fashion the second international here at the Sydney Cricket Ground by 16 points to 11. We now find the stage set for what should be an exciting deciding test. Australia have made a number of changes in the side that was beaten in the second test side. And Great Britain, if anything, a little bit stronger than the side that they fielded in that match.
Thank you, Alan. Well, it's bound to be a plenty of stick early. Both teams will get stuck right into the issue from the onset. They seem to have a licence to do this when rep teams meet. But as long as we don't get any vicious play ensuing, well, that's the name of the game. They will test each other out. It'll be like two prize fighters gaining each other's respect. Once this respect is gained, well, the teams will settle down to play football. And I'm sure the crowd here today, a wonderful crowd, wonderful conditions, are in for a great game of football.
But first, the Great Britain side, Maurice Richards is in on the wing in place of David Redfern, with Les Dill in the centre taking the place of Dave Eckersley, who played in the second test here in Sydney. Also new to the forwards, Terry Clausen has come back from injury to take his place in the front row. A very strong side, a stronger side, I think David had to agree, than that which took the field in the second test. Mr. Whitlam being introduced to the players by Mr. Kevin Humphreys, the president of the Australian Rugby League, and Mr. Reg Parker, the manager of the Great Britain touring side. Colin Dixon, number 9, being introduced. Now, the Australian team, while we're looking at the Great Britain players, contains 7 new players from the side that was originally named for the second test. Graham Langlands returns at fullback. Lionel Williamson and Ray Brannigan are the new first-choice wingers. Tim Pickup in preference to Jeff Richardson at 5'8". North Sydney 5'8", Tim Pickup coming out.
12 metres out, one tackle to go. Gradonicus out to Beatson, keeping the ball alive to Williamson. Langlands is with him. Langlands going for the far line. Chisnell across, getting it to Williamson, who scores.
First try of the match. Pick up down to the quarter line and dumped by Dixon. Timmy Pickup was put down that time. Colin Dixon standing there looking at the damage he's done. A very hard footballer. And as you can see, he's trying to urge on his fellow forwards to give as much. Gray, Clausen, it's Chisnell, long pass out towards the centres. Hesketh coming back in field. Charlton up from fullback. Good switching of play by Great Britain. Charlton away. Charlton to Hesketh. Hesketh accelerating. Williamson across to drag him down. Gray. But still it is. He'll score. First try to Great Britain. Nash. Clausen. Gill got a well-timed pass away, but it was intercepted by McCarthy. McCarthy racing for the line. He's going to be too fast. He's a specialist at that, and it's paid off again.
He has a wonderful understanding with his half-back partner, no matter who it is. And, of course, the fella is always capable of doing something different.
Clausen, a hard man to stop, and he's caught with O'Neill moving in and immediately being involved in the action. And you saw what happened with Terry Clausen being called upon to play the ball, and O'Neill moved in to put him to ground. But although this kick is a long way out, it's a very valuable one for Great Britain if they can kick it, David.
Well, that's very true, it is, and it's just before the half-time hooter goes anyway, and the thing is this, we haven't got to be lulled into any sort of these tactics now at all. We've got to keep away from it and use the ball as often as, you know, we possibly can, because there's no doubt about it, if we do start playing football as we can play football, we can win this test match this afternoon.
John Gray attempting the penalty kick. He's almost at halfway, and what a beautiful kick. It's long and high, and it's there. A great kick from Johnny Gray. 10 points to 9 the score. Clausen will kick. No, he won't. Nichols, Nash. It's Gray, caught by Fulton. John O'Neill to be spoken to for that one. We may have a look at that in action replay. We didn't see whether or not that connected or not, but the intention was there. That was quite evident. John Gray, nevertheless, is confronted with quite a long kick, something of the order of about 45 metres, and that kick long enough under ordinary conditions, but when we have such a blustery wind as is prevailing today, it's even more difficult. You'll notice that Gray even has a fair amount of difficulty in being able to stand the ball straight upright. With 2 minutes before half-time, Gray attempting the kick, another good high one, another beautiful kick, and Great Britain in front again. John Gray kicks another goal. Gray, another high kick, the forwards chasing it up. Brannigan running in to help Langlands. He might have to take it himself. Lost it, he's a try. Is it a try? It is. Gray has a very difficult kick once again, but he's kicked very well under the conditions today. But he can't get the ball any further out than this. He's about 2 centimetres in from the touchline, right on the quarter line. Gray putting it well into the air, and it's a 6-point lead at half-time. What a magnificent kick he's turned in today. Brannigan. The Australian crowd now sensing an opportunity for the Australian team to score. Turner, O'Neill, Beatson. Coote was wide. Coote to the corner. Charlton to beat Langlands. One tackle to go. Fulton calling for it behind play. There he is. Didn't get time to kick. He'll have to run it. Away from Dixon. Fulton.
looking for support. There's Cronin. Cronin over the quarter line to Coote. Coote going for the corner and he's in. He's there. Roger Millwood, recognised as one of the liveliest 5'8" in the game, and referee Keith Page doesn't quite understand that he's the replacement man. He is now. And John Gray going to kick for goal for Great Britain. The penalty awarded beyond the quarter line and almost straight in front. His only consideration will have to be the effect of this breeze on the ball.
I think this is a very wise decision, because if this is converted, it means that we are only 4 points behind then, which means a try and a goal can still clinch it in these closing stages of this test match.
John Gray will attempt to draw the points a little bit closer now. It's not a difficult kick. He's kicked a lot harder ones than this. And that's his form. Australia in front, but now by only 4 points, 22 points to 18. John Gray kicking goal number 6. Full-time siren sounding. Scrum won by Great Britain. Millward. Play on. Cronin is caught, and that is the end of the game. And the series won by Australia, and a jubilant captain coach Graham Langlands going out on top at the end of such a triumphant career. Graham Langlands over 100 points in Test Rugby League matches against Great Britain, and captain of the side to defeat Great Britain 2 tests to 1 in this 1974 series.
But it was a super series. It was saved by, as far as I was concerned, Kevin Humphreys turning around and saying, "You fellas have got to pull up your socks, else you're going nowhere."
We were well in the top 4 or top 5 for the whole round. It was only in the latter part of the year that we lost a few games, and I can recall the game that we got knocked out of the 5, and that was the second last game of the year against St George at North Sydney Oval. And the thing that beat us that day was Graham Langlands was playing fullback, and he went off injured. They switched Teddy Goodwin from centre to fullback at half time. He came out and destroyed us in the second half.
We beat North Sydney at North Sydney Oval and put them out of the semis. But we came back into the dressing room, and Graham Langlands, he was our captain coach at that particular time, admitted, he said, that is the best team that he's ever played against in North Sydney since in his career. And they were the words he said, and he said, if that team stays together and moulds as a team next year, he said they'll go pretty close to winning the premiership. Now that was the words of Graham Langlands. He was one of the greatest players the Lace to beat.
And we had to beat Parramatta at Parramatta, and I think it was Wests and Saints or Wests had to beat someone else, you know. And you're not going to, and we weren't favoured to beat Parramatta, but we did, and we did a good job on them. And we thought, you beauty, we're in. And I think it was the other side got beaten, and it tipped us out just by that point. So we were pretty unlucky there, and we'd had a damn good year, and well, we had our best year, and things were looking real good, you know.
Halfway through the year, I said to Acker, I said, why don't you start signing these guys up? Because a lot of guys are coming off contract, and then it'll be the same old Norse. They'll go here, there and everywhere. And so they messed around, didn't sign anyone up. And at the end of the year, Norse came and made me an offer, which wasn't much of an offer.